Howdy everyone, and welcome to the Serial Geek TV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock, and today we're going to take a look at one of my favourite cartoons of the 1980s, The Incredible Hulk by Marvel Productions. 1981 saw the debut of Marvel Productions' Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on NBC, and the series naturally became a huge success. For the following season, NBC and Marvel paired Amazing Friends with another Marvel Comics based series, The Incredible Hulk, with this double bill originally given the title of The Incredible Hulk and The Amazing Spider-Man. The Hulk himself had appeared in Amazing Friends' first season as a guest star in Spidey Goes Hollywood, although this was mostly a generic interpretation of the character since this was only a one-shot appearance. With the famous Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno live-action series coming to an end in 1982, Marvel's new Incredible Hulk animated series took far more inspiration from the original comics than the live-action series had done. The Hulk had appeared in his own animated series once before as part of the Marvel superheroes from 1966. Those stories were based quite literally on the original comic books, going so far as to use the original comic book art itself. The episodes of this earlier series were mostly taken from the Hulk's run in the 1960s Tales to Astonish comic, characterised by Bruce Banner's secret identity as the Hulk still being a secret at the time. In those stories, a major concern of Banner's was to alleviate any suspicions on his mysterious disappearances in the eyes of both General Ross and Major Talbot. The 1982 Incredible Hulk series followed on essentially the same lines as the 1960s comic books and cartoons, rather than the contemporary comics in which Banner's secret was known to all and he was on the run as a fugitive. Like the 1960s comics and cartoons, the regular cast in the 1982 series consisted of Banner himself, sidekick Rick Jones, Banner's fiancée Betty Ross, here depicted as a scientist on equal footing to Banner in contrast to the comics, General Ross, and Major Talbot, with his first name being changed to Ned rather than Glenn as in the comics, something that I still get wrong to this day. Whereas the original cartoons followed the then contemporary comics by depicting the Hulk retaining a reasonable amount of intelligence, the 1982 series had a whole decade's worth of Savage Hulk comics to draw inspiration from, and this was the version used in this particular series. The voice cast for the show included Michael Bell as the hapless Bruce Banner and Bob Holt as the Incredible Hulk himself. Both actors were exceptionally well cast, with Bell's portrayal of the tortured Banner truly emphasising just how much he genuinely hated being the Hulk, and Bob Holt's almost indescribable guttural tones perfectly capturing the savage nature of the character, holding his vocal performance as the Hulk as perhaps the definitive version of the character.
Men on wheels make Hulk angry. When Hulk angry, Hulk smash!
Aside from the aforementioned talents of Michael Bell as Bruce Banner and Bob Holt as the Hulk, we also had B.J. Ward as Betty Ross, who gave a performance that was both strong and assertive, matching the character's far more prominent role in this world that Marvel Productions had created. Michael Horton as Rick Jones is one of my favourite names to have contributed to this show. You may also know him as Chip Chase in the Transformers, but I'll always know him as Jessica Fletcher's nephew. His voice is so immediately noticeable that I performed a literal double take when I first heard him speak on Murder, She Wrote. Robert Ridgely, a prominent voice actor with Filmation, is perfectly cast as the bellowing General Ross, with a young Pat Fraley as Ned Talbot in what was one of the actor's earliest voice roles. I should say that I especially enjoy Robert Ridgely's performance as Thunderbolt Ross. There's both the assertiveness that we're used to from the comic books and a surprising warmth to his voice whenever Ross converses with his daughter Betty.
Oh, easy, darling. Just making sure my future son-in-law isn't too overcautious.
Susan Blue and Roberto Cruz add to the main cast as Rita and Rio respectively. And, of course, Stan Lee as the narrator. And that's something I should mention, a problem that has arisen with the episodes over the decades since the show first aired. Due to the audio of the episodes being edited by NBC over the years, some of the Stan Lee narrations are missing from the versions that have made their way onto DVD. For example, here's my old VHS release of Punks on Wheels.
Hang loose, heroes. From here on in, we're really gonna move.
And here's how that same scene plays on the DVD release. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure a release of the series will ever see all of the Stan Lee narrations restored, and it is a shame, as I thought those moments of Stan Lee dialogue did what they were intended to do, make us feel like we were watching a comic book brought to life. Looking over the credits for this show, we have some notable names that are worth me highlighting. Nelson Shin is a name that should be familiar to anyone that loves the Transformers, as he directed Transformers the movie, and his company, ACOM, animated much of the 3rd season of the show, with mixed results. Kent Butterworth seemed to really find his feet later working on the New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, and is these days probably most famous for animating the rejected pilot episode of The Simpsons, due to his very animated take on the characters. Honestly, I actually really like his take on The Simpsons, especially given how flat the show looks these days. One of my favourite names on the end credits is probably Sid Marcus. Sid had been an animation director for decades, and one of the shows he had previously worked on, the 1966 Marvel Superheroes animated shorts, which of course included The Incredible Hulk. Looking at the storyboard department, like so many storyboard departments at the time, it's chock full of talent. Rick Hoberg is one of those names that I always seem to associate with Marvel Productions, even though he also pretty much worked at every animation studio. During the 80s and 90s, aside from storyboarding many an animated series, he also illustrated numerous comic books. Larry Houston was not only a prevalent storyboard artist at Marvel Productions, but most famously produced and directed the immensely popular X-Men cartoon from the 90s, having worked on the Pride of the X-Men pilot in the 80s. He also famously illustrated many of the mini-comics that came with the Masters of the Universe action figures, and he's an all-round great guy. Sherman Labby is a name I first stumbled upon as an uncredited storyboard artist on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Turns out that he was a rather talented storyboard artist that worked on a plethora of Filmation shows, and a few movies you may have heard of: Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Witches of Eastwick, Broadcast News, Lethal Weapon 2, Thelma and Louise, and this other one, Blade Runner? No, I've never heard of it either. Don Manuel is one of my favourite storyboard artists of all time, and seems to have been one of the most prevalent during the 1980s, working at both Filmation and Marvel Productions. Will Mineo, the man with a surname that I'm always afraid I'll butcher. Will's career in animation is rather epic, having worked on shows for Hanna-Barbera, Marvel Productions, Geek, Tokyo Movie Shinsha. The list is endless. And remember that advert that appeared in numerous comic books back in the day for the Atari Masters of the Universe video game? Will illustrated that. How cool is that? Michael Swanigan, I always describe him as the biggest fan of the very industry he worked in. He often included many Easter eggs in his storyboards, some of which would get through, others not so much. And finally, Doug Wildey. Yeah, he created the 1964 animated television series Johnny Quest for Hanna-Barbera Productions, so a talented bunch indeed. The series itself was somewhat hampered by featuring an intrinsically violent character while having many restrictions imposed upon the show by the network censors, and these edicts were reflected in the types of foes the Hulk usually faced. Aside from his archenemy the Leader, the Hulk never faced any of his other traditional foes such as Tyrannus, the Abomination or Zax, presumably since he was not allowed to throw punches at any of them. Even so, other Marvel Comics villains such as Dr. Octopus and the Puppet Master did make appearances in the series, better connecting the series to the Marvel Universe. For example, Dr. Octopus's character design was taken straight from the 1981 solo Spider-Man series, and when Doc Ock next appeared in Amazing Friends' 3rd season, he was depicted exactly the same as he appeared in the Hulk, right down to Michael Bell's appropriately over-the-top performance. Although the 1982 Hulk cartoon would run concurrently with Amazing Friends, Dr. Octopus's appearance in both series was the only direct connection one series would have with the other. Aside from the obvious inclusion of She-Hulk in one of the episodes, no other superhero guest stars appeared in the series, this remaining the remit of Amazing Friends. With Amazing Friends' 2nd season only consisting of 3 episodes, all animated by Toei Doga in Japan, the animation for the Hulk cartoon, as with the 1981 solo Spider-Man series and Amazing Friends' 1st season, was outsourced to South Korea, this time to the Pan-Seng East Animation Company. As with the 2 Spider-Man series, the Hulk featured clean John Romita-esque character designs that translated well to animation. Notably, the Hulk himself was given a more fearsome appearance with yellow eyes and split eyebrows. Coupled with Bob Holt's growls, this version of the Hulk, even filtered through network sensors, was still an almost frightening presence on screen. It is also worth mentioning that up until this point, in his various appearances, the Hulk had been illustrated with purple torn trousers, as Marvel had turned this into his signature look, and to some extent his costume. In this series, however, the character was given maroon ripped trousers. This look appeared in no other canon. This, combined with the aforementioned changes to his look, made this an incredibly unique Hulk. With regards to the animation, one of the most memorable aspects of the series were the stock transformation sequences depicting Banner actually becoming the Hulk, which could be cut into the episode at the relevant moment. These were not always used consistently, with a couple of episodes not using them at all, but they were impressive pieces of animation that did well to convey the power behind each transformation. On the reverse side of things, an infamous aspect of this series was that when the Hulk changed back into Bruce Banner, his clothes would magically reappear. From a dramatic standpoint, this was obviously to ensure Banner's secret identity, as the Hulk would remain secret, without the need for continual excuses as to why his clothes were torn. The writer's Bible for the series yields no in-universe explanation, simply stating that since the comics originally ignored this aspect of Banner's changes, they would ignore it too, even though the comics didn't actually ignore it. Another notable aspect of the series was just how much emphasis it put on Bruce Banner truly wanting to rid himself of the Hulk due to how much his condition was ruining his life. The idea that both main characters of the series effectively wanted to kill the other was a comparatively dark subject matter for a networked children's cartoon, and even though this was typically depicted in overly melodramatic ways, it was a successful method of transferring Banner's anxieties over from the famous live-action series. For such a short series consisting of 13 episodes, The Incredible Hulk somehow managed to feel like a much bigger show, even with the lack of supervillains. I think this is largely in part to the scripts taking the premise very seriously. One has only to look at the names on the title cast to know that these writers meant business, with the legendary Michael Reeves penning many an episode. Even episodes that could be considered average by the standards set by the series still feature wonderful character interactions and drama, and this relates to something I've always loved about the show, the main cast. They really do feel connected at times, like a dysfunctional family. The voice actors, whom I've already mentioned, do a wonderful job bringing life to these characters, and there's a great deal of heart in this show.
Men usually speak for themselves, Banner.
Well, I think she did just fine. Dad?
Yes, well, let's get on with it.
I have to say that personally I love the additions of Rio and his daughter Rita. The pair give a little more shape to the life of Rick Jones, who in the initial comic books was portrayed as somewhat of an unloved loner. Rio is a warm fatherly figure who grows to respect Rick, and Rita is a young, no-nonsense firecracker of a woman ready to lovingly mock her boyfriend should Rick get a little full of himself. Both Rio and Rita have their own mini adventures in the series, the writers treating the characters as a part of the comic book established main cast. One of the things the show did really well was ramp up the tension like no other. These were somewhat obviously best demonstrated in the moments with Bruce Banner in a situation which would see he or his friends in danger, prompting the hapless scientist to fight to keep the Hulk within him. And whilst we all wanted to see the Hulk, much like the live action show before it, the cartoon presented the Hulk's appearance as the last thing Bruce Banner or anyone nearby, like Rick, wanted to see. Coupled with rather lovely animation direction and incredible, pardon the pun, music from Johnny Douglas, those moments of tension felt like something out of a live action drama, not a Saturday morning cartoon. With regards to the episodes themselves, Origin of the Hulk is a notable episode of the series which partly retells the origin story of the character as originally created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. A notable change is the removal of the Russian spy element of the story, which was updated to an alien force intent on stealing Banner's gamma ray formula. The episode has many standout moments. The scene in which Bruce Banner is bombarded with gamma rays is astounding and really does showcase how powerful the visuals of the series could be. Probably the only episode that tilts towards the more comical side is The Incredible Shrinking Hulk. The very premise of the Hulk being shrunk down and having to face a world of rather unique obstacles is the stuff of Saturday morning cartoon legend, as it's hard to find any cartoon during this time that didn't use this plot device. The episode still treats the characters seriously, though we do get one rather out of character moment for the Hulk. As the Hulk stops a hijacked tank in its tracks by bending the barrel, Ned Talbot orders the Hulk not to damage the tank. The Hulk somewhat apologetically stops, shrugs, and bends the barrel of the tank back into position. One episode that I really love is The Creature and the Cave Girl. In the episode, our main cast are transported to prehistoric times, you know, as you do. Banner, as the Hulk, begins to explore this strange new world, only to encounter a rather striking prehistoric woman named Omila. In short, the Hulk falls in love, and his love is most definitely reciprocated. We of course get, as Rick Jones so perfectly puts it, the jealous boyfriend, but that situation is dealt with a comical show of strength competition. However, what I love about the episode isn't just that we get to see a new side of the Hulk's character, or that we marvel at how Bob Holt could give that deep guttural voice of the Hulk so much heart, but it's the end of this episode that gets me every time. The story culminates with the Hulk and Omila about to reunite when suddenly the Green Goliath is transported back to the present. This scene is stretched out perfectly, with the Hulk and Omila desperately trying to reach one another, soon realising that their efforts are in vain. As Omila fades from sight, the Hulk falls to his knees and weeps. It's a striking scene and one that we can believe as we have invested in the Hulk's connection to Omila. The end of this episode is heartbreaking, as Bruce, somewhat confused, with no memory of his time as the Hulk, speaks to Rick, feeling as if he's lost something, and in a powerful line says, "And it hurts." We really feel for the Hulk. For a moment in time he discovered pure happiness, only for it to be cruelly ripped away from him. Enter She-Hulk is a fantastic action-adventure episode featuring the She-Hulk in her first animated appearance. She steals every scene she's in, and the character is taken seriously, not played for laughs, and never simply feels like a female Hulk. Because she retains the intelligence of her alter ego Jennifer Walters, the story soon explores what it would be like if the Hulk had the mind of Bruce Banner, leading to one of my favourite dramatic sequences from the series. And direction of this scene in which Bruce Banner and Jennifer Walters transform into their green-skinned alter egos is wonderful. And a few years back I even managed to obtain a key frame from this sequence. Look at that cell. Glorious. Aside from Bruce Banner attempting to gain control over the Hulk's mind in this episode, we also have the main plot, which involves Jennifer attempting to uncover the activities of Hydra long before Hydra became known within the world of pop culture. However, by far regarded as the best episode of the series is Prisoner of the Monster, which features Bruce Banner actually succeeding in curing himself of the Hulk, only to later learn in a cruel twist of fate that the Hulk is the only viable defence against Banner's own stolen weapon. Whether by coincidence or design, this was the last episode of The Incredible Hulk shown in the UK during its original run, making the episode serve as a perfect place for the series to end. Speaking of the UK airings, the show first aired over here on the 2nd of April 1984, and here's something that I probably shouldn't admit and that you will almost definitely laugh at. So, the weeks prior, across January, February and March, I'd been enjoying He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. On that first Monday in April, I tuned in to Children's ITV expecting to see He-Man and instead saw the Hulk. I was so disappointed that He-Man was no longer on that I actually ran up to my room and cried. Yes, stop laughing. The following week I watched the show, and within a few episodes the Hulk became one of my favourite comic book related cartoons of the 1980s, so there you go. I could talk about every episode of the series at length, but instead I'll recommend that you take a few evenings out to watch the show. The 1982 Incredible Hulk cartoon, while popular, had no further episodes produced after its initial season, with episodes simply rerun the following season alongside a short new season of Amazing Friends. the double bill now titled The Amazing Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk. Around this time in 1983, Marvel Comics adapted one of the episodes, When Monsters Meet, into comic book form, although its art style followed the original comics rather than the actual animated series. After the original NBC airings, both Amazing Friends and The Incredible Hulk were split up and syndicated as separate series, and this is invariably how they are seen today. While the comic book Hulk has ironically been in a state of flux ever since the 1982 series was broadcast, successive animated series and live-action versions of the character have been patterned after his classic 1970s comic book incarnation, much like the 1982 series itself. One very notable innovation of the 1982 Incredible Hulk cartoon was the role of supporting character Betty Ross, who rather than being a somewhat helpless civilian, was actually a scientific colleague to Bruce Banner, a change which has consistently been employed in every subsequent cartoon and live-action production. Although never quite as popular as Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the 1982 Incredible Hulk cartoon, as one of only 3 1980s Marvel Comics based series, was still a noteworthy addition to the vast amount of action-orientated series of the 1980s. In particular, the performance of Bob Holt as the titular character has become by far one of the most definitive and true to the comics versions of the character seen to date, and a true testament to Marvel Productions' capabilities during the 80s. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.